I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this message.
There's something out there. It's a highly contagious disease. It can be especially serious, even fatal to infants. Unfortunately, many people who spread it may not know they have it. It's called whooping cough, and the CDC recommends everyone, including those around babies, make sure their whooping cough vaccination is up to date. Understand the danger your new grandchild faces. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist about you and your family.
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I...
I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USA Watchdog.com. We're this guest we've had on several times, and people have started to ping me routinely to get this person back on. He made some big predictions just on this channel. One of them, this is when we were really mixing it up, is a year and a half, 2 years ago. He said that Russia, and the United States would end up working together. And what's going on in Syria, correct. He said there'd be great strife in Europe and that there'd be civil war in France. Another bingo. He also said Turkey was going to be a real problem. Well, it is a real problem. They're a NATO country, and they're attacking our own, the people that we're backing, the Kurds in Syria. That's just one of many things. We moved our nukes out of Turkey. Let me bring him on. He is Warren Pollock. Warren Pollock, you are a financial analyst, a big-time financial analyst. You used to be. Now you're not anymore. You're just coming on to help us understand the world we live in. Way to go on all the predictions. You made many other predictions too, with about how the internet would snoop on you and know everything about you, Hadoop, and all that. Now, tell me what's going on right now with your predictions.
Well, I think I just want to talk about this very shortly and briefly, because I think where we are is more important than where we will be, because right now we're sort of in a twilight zone of transition between stability and instability. And during this time, I think it's a very dangerous time. For some, it will be more dangerous than the actual collapse. But some of the key predictions I made included a crisis in governance. And what you see in the elections today sort of speaks to that. I talked about quantitative easing, and I did that in 2003 on CBS Radio. I talked about the fact that oil price would be where it is today, that there'd be no shortage of oil. And if you followed me from 2003, I think I've predicted things with a great deal of efficacy, because I'm looking at things from a different perspective entirely. And thus, when I talk to you today, and I have a very important talk to you today, probably the most important talk that you'll hear in months, I'm going to talk about where we are in this twilight zone. I'm going to give a shout out to James Howard Kunstler, who spent about 2 hours with me on the phone, being a sounding board, and I'm going to use a key idea of his. I'm going to combine it with some key ideas of mine, and then give you a critical thinking overview of where we are and some tips on your own survival. And I think that's what is more important than me telling you where the world is going. I want to tell you today where you are and what you need to do, or at least to start to do, to try to protect yourself during a time where a lot of things work, but a lot of things don't work. And things are working right now for a very few. It won't work for them much longer. The entire system that we live in today is one large racketeering engine. And we really have to understand that for us to negotiate around this looting that's going to occur. You cannot eliminate all the looting from your life, but you can go around it to a certain degree. For example, if you go into a needed pair of eyeglasses today, you might have to spend several $100s on a pair of eyeglasses when someone in China is buying a pair of eyeglasses for $5 or $10 of the same or better quality. You talk about people in China having access to 3D printing technology. Here, right now, the big companies want to be involved in this sort of technology. In China, the small companies want to be involved in that kind of technology. So there are really things that you're going to need to survive, which are becoming less available to you. The EpiPen would be an example of that. And racketeering is
the EpiPen where they were, hold on, so people know, the EpiPen where they were charging something like, 5,000% higher, a $5 pen they were charging $800 for, or something like that. Is that right? That's what you're talking about?
Right. The medical industrial complex is sort of a nexus or a main part of racketeering. But really, when you think about it, racketeering exists in everything that you use today in your ordinary life. You go to buy a car, you can't do that. You got to lease it. You have to perpetually owe money for college. You have to buy very inflated, eyeglasses. You can't even buy a car that provides you with utility. The major cars that provide utility are now luxury trucks. So all of these are really racketeering elements. Let's say you deal with Verizon, they'll send you a letter. That letter will say, well, you could buy our new piece of equipment for $48 a month, or you could use our old one for an additional $2 a month. I'm sorry, you could buy our new piece of equipment for $50 and we'll charge you a fee, or you could just pay us a fee for your old equipment. This is racketeering. There is no competition in the United States. There is no free election. There is no free market. There is not capitalism. All of these things, which you believe to be in place right now, are lies. They are procedural systems, like the Ford assembly line, which are set up to be racketeering engines. Procedural racketeering. It's a veneer of a functioning economy, a functioning system. And this sort of procedural racketeering is also procedural control, procedural information gathering. It is the dystopia of epic proportions. I'm at the beach one day. I don't own a cell phone. I crushed the damn thing. And I am around me. All the cell phones are ringing with an amber alert. And all of the people are going to be mobilized to look for this missing person. But guess what? If you're a criminal, they will mobilize against you. A procedure has been put into stone to round up potential dissenters in the future. And this is not paranoia. This is fact. Fact. A psychologist realizes that all her patient relationships are now discovered by social networking. I talked about this in one of my presentations. Why do you think that Microsoft bought LinkedIn? It is procedural information accumulation. It is procedural control. Now, the eyeglass example is right on my mind. I went through this process in the eye doctor, and he moves you from station to station. And that makes sense because it's very efficient, like the assembly line. I get to the end. I say, please give me a prescription for short and long glasses. I don't want to wear progressive glasses. The millennial says to me, here, we only have a single prescription. Do the maths, M-A-T-H-S. I said, I don't want to do the maths. I just paid you for a service. Can you ask the doctor? No, it's the procedure. Think about how many procedures that you've run into in your life where they're telling you to see some other person to take care of some other element of what you need done. These procedures, you cannot proceduralize an economy, you cannot proceduralize a society and have it be functional. You can proceduralize some parts of a society to become more efficient. But if you try to proceduralize something that is very complex and you withdraw sort of the brains of the operation, I guess we have epsilons to alphas in our economy. If you take away the alphas and the betas, you cannot respond to exceptions. You cannot respond to corruption. You cannot be flexible in any way whatsoever. It is a rigid procedure. And think about your life and how you interrelate with procedures. And you will find that each and every one of these procedures leads to a destination, and that destination is racketeering. No doubt about it. And why don't we say that these procedures in total are described by some people incorrectly as the New World Order. The correct way to describe this is the apparatus, the procedural looting and racketeering apparatus that is systemically present in our political systems, in our economy, into our interrelations between each other. So we have sort of this apparatus similar to a communist apparatus, similar to a watch with many dials in it, many gears in it. And that apparatus, think about a watch. You have the gears, they start to wear a little bit. You're a cog in this machine, and all of a sudden the gears wear off one of these small components. And guess what? The thing functions poorly, and then a little later, the thing stops functioning entirely. Now, I could go and tell you where we're going to be geopolitically and even politically, financially, and otherwise. But I think for your survival, it is totally essential that you understand where we are with no ambiguity whatsoever. We are within the context of racketeering. Procedures are the tools which the racketeers use. And then the apparatus is the very large global system, peak apparatus, where we are today. And this isn't something you need to get emotional about. This isn't something you can blame on a single individual. We have allowed our system to degenerate to the point where people cannot make decisions.
And you started out saying some things are going to work. Right now, things are working, but they're not going to be working long. Briefly, what do you think is going to work, and what do you think's not going to work?
I don't think anything is going to work properly. And the idea of the watch is the way to understand that. A watch is an integrated system. It's a systems of gears which intermesh. Now, I think it's Nassim Taleb, and I've actually read his book. He talks about having sort of a resilient society. And if you look at our society, there's right now a major freight carrier in bankruptcy, and guess what? The ships don't move. Everything is integrated to perfection, and everything is a watch with the cogs and gears fitting together very well.
Well, the collapse of Korea's Hanjin shipping is sending ripples through global trade as the country's largest port turned away its ships and as some manufacturers scrambled for freight alternatives. Our Hwang Woo-jin has more on how the repercussions are being felt all around the world.
Less than 24 hours since the trade giant of Korea filed for bankruptcy protection, and the news has shocked the global trade market. Ports around the world, including those in China, Spain, and the US, have denied access to Hanjin ships over fears that Hanjin's creditors could seize the cargo vessels before they dock, not to mention the ships potentially not being able to pay their fees. In fact, a smaller-sized Hanjin vessel, the Hanjin Rome, was seized by a creditor in Singapore late on Monday. Experts say more docks around the world will follow suit. The Wall Street Journal reported that U.S. exporters are jostling to rebook containers with other carriers to reload their cargoes ahead of the retail boom that accompanies Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, and Christmas. Hanjin Shipping has halted its operations, and with global market share of 2.9%, the drop in tonnage will likely lead to skyrocketing costs.
Shipping companies have a lot of customers outside of Korea, so Hanjin's case is rather a global public concern with a greater impact than other companies.
A Korean court will determine as early this week whether Hanjin should be liquidated or given a chance to restructure and possibly survive. Hwang Woo-jin, Arirang News.
The whole system is racketeering. That's what sort of started me off thinking, and that's what put me into this combination punch, where I could summarize it to you, very concisely, very clearly, and without ambiguity.
The whole system is racketeering.
The whole system, soup to nuts. And when I was traveling in communist Bulgaria, again, I went to, when the Berlin Wall fell, I didn't go to the Berlin Wall, but a few years later, I traveled by bus to the border of Turkey and Bulgaria, and I wanted to go over the border because I wanted to see what communism was like. And these people were evading the procedure of communism. I got a hitchhike. First of all, the border guard says Americans only fly. That's the first thing he said. He was using a DEC VAX computer, something he used from the United States, that we sold them. And I guess the U.S. has Henry Ford sold car plants to the communists, first of all. And he's like, go back to Istanbul, take the daily train, and this way we can screen you. So I didn't want to do that. So I hitchhiked overland, and the first city I hit is Poldev, and I hitchhiked with these two ladies that were smuggling yeast in, because yeast is something in a very small packet, and it's used to make bread. And I get to this town, and the whole town smells of machine oil. I go into a taxi, and I'm afraid for my life. I pick up the hood, and there is a natural gas can in the Lada. I go to the hotel. There's the bad prostitutes in the lobby and the good prostitutes near the casino at the top. You put $20 down on the casino, and they think it's a life savings. I gave someone the person that gave me a lift $100, and they thought it was like a year's wages. I mean, these are all the symptoms of where America is going next. It's not because of communism. It's because of a lack of integrity. When communism was on the cusp of failing, people had to be very flexible. They had to think on their feet. They had to go and know when to pay the $20 bribe and when not to pay the $20 bribe. And that right now is required of you if you want to survive. Now, Greg asks a question, when is the collapse going to happen? And we're in a worse period, a pre-collapse period. This is what happened before World War II. This is what happened when Rome fell. There was a period in time where things worked sort of, a sort of function, a sort of dysfunction. What you need most is critical thinking. You need to be able to think on your feet. You need to understand the overview of where you are. That's the most important thing. And you need not to panic. So I see people that have been so divided and conquered, so polarized, so convinced that they're right, that they cannot critically think, even if they could. They've been confused by this informational overload that they can't think clearly. I've seen people in the shopping mall refusing to stay calm in an emergency. What you need to do is to start to critically think and view everything as an apparatus, as a procedure, as racketeering. And that's what you need. That's what you need to do. I can tell you to fish. I can't teach you how to fish. In a society that's functional, the society can survive with some percentage of racketeering. Right now, racketeering is so pervasive that you cannot do the things that you need to do in a society for that society to function. So, Greg, I sort of said my piece. There's sort of a combination of punch of things that you need to remember. The things that you need to remember are you're dealing with apparatus, a global apparatus. You have to understand that it's an apparatus of racketeering control, of informational control, information gathering. It's a PC, procedural control, or control by procedure, or control by process. And we have to know also it's a looting process. And in this looting, your odds of survival decrease and decrease and decrease. So we have apparatus, racketeering, and as well as procedure in a twilight zone. So if I'm going to give you an overview of where we are, it would be in the twilight period, a twilight zone, a Rod Serling type of existence, a surreal existence. That's where we are today, and no one really has said this, I don't think, in a coordinated way. You can get snippets of this. You can get snippets of this everywhere, but the real thing is to put the whole thing together and then to use that as actionable information. I'm giving you tools in critical thinking for your own survival, and that's my gift to you today, as opposed to telling you where things are going. I'm telling you exactly without ambiguity where they are. It's time to be independent. And it's time to understand that procedures are in place that you can use as you slide along them, which you can buck. You could say, oh, you asked me to do that? Well, you're not entitled to that. There's the procedure for that. Why don't you speak to your compliance officer? Why don't you speak to your ombudsman? Oh, can you clarify this? Can you ask a question? Believe me, no one's going to take responsibility if you buck them. That could be used to your advantage in avoiding these things. If you evade them, they'll put you in jail, like Peter Schiff's father, like Martin Armstrong, or they'll defranchise you, make you a martyr, like Anne Barnhart.
And this election, I'm going to give you a little to tie up. So you think they're going to keep the system floating? Do you think Hillary Clinton will make it? Trump looks awful strong at this point. She looks awful weak. Do you think they're going to steal the election? Do you think? What do you think?
I think the election's already stolen. I mean, I talk about this again in my Talk to Newsday about New York State. If you have two guys that are in corruption, one Democrat and one Republican, one's in the House, one's in the Senate, are you really in a functional republic? Well, if the state's not performing as a republic, isn't it the federal government's obligation under our Constitution to make sure that it does? And that's the idea of looking at things objectively, taking responsibility, doing something, and dealing with the consequences. Frankly, Trump is more apt to take responsibility for his failure because he's failed previously, and he uses his failure. He uses the procedure of bankruptcy to his advantage. That's an example. Oh, bankruptcy is a good thing. Yeah, it is, because he used the procedure to his benefit. At least he's providing that lesson. Clinton's providing the other lesson. Clinton is saying, if you give me your vote, if you want something, write a check to the, to this. If I need to do something, I'll just erase the emails. Okay, so you have one person that uses the process of the apparatus to his benefit, and you have the other person that sort of is part of the apparatus. She is part of the racketeering engine, and she uses that to her benefit in rigging the system. So, it's a person that writes down what the process is versus the person that glides through the process. Both those are effective strategies. They're not just strategies for running a functional country. That's the problem of it. I think that Clinton, her odds, let's say you read every day on the Drudge Report. Well, guess what? You're only reading from the Drudge Report. Read from the New York Times, and it's all anti-Trump. So,
oh yeah,
I also predicted popularism. That was something that I predicted, I think, in my first Zero Hedge article. So here we are with Trump. But let's talk about our first talk, crisis in governance. Do you really think Hillary Clinton would have the moral authority to lead, Greg?
No.
Do you really think that the criminals who are the Democratic and Republican Party would let Trump lead?
Yeah, probably not, but maybe they'll pull it out. I just can't give up.
Even if they pull it out, I mean,
I just can't pull up. Maybe he'll pull it out. Power of the presidency is awful powerful.
That's what a crisis in governance is. And then there's the question of who's in charge. If the leader in New York, both leaders were sort of indicted for corruption, then the whole tree has to be chopped down, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
But who's in charge? Who's in charge of the lunatic asylum? And the same thing with your federal government. I mean, I had a federal official respond to me in a letter that Congress had not empowered her to make a decision. Then why the hell am I paying your salary?
Yes.
So that's the sad state of affairs. The buck stops. A very good thing to remember. The buck stops. And the procedure stops is something else to remember. I know this isn't what we usually talk about, but I think this is the most important thing.
No problem.
And I'm sincerely trying to help your viewership. You really, you have to be objective. You need an overview of where you are. You have to think. Not everyone is capable of that. If you don't know how to think, it's time for you to learn. Because, in these sort of critical situations, if you do not have this overview that I've given you today, and most of your friends, if you try to tell them this, they'll just get angry at you. You may have to cut them loose. It's just as simple as that if you want to survive. How important it is. That's it. I wish everyone good luck, and I hope they can make it through the next few years.
Warren Pollock, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. Always interesting, always different, and I got to say, usually and almost always correct 100%. Nobody's 100%, but you're pretty close, my friend. Thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
I'd like to be wrong, Greg.
Yeah, I know you would. Thank you, Warren Pollock.
Thanks.
You can find the complete interview at USAWatchdog.com.